Shifting focus now to Sudan, where deadly clashes have continued for a fourth day, killing at least 185 people. More than 1,800 have been injured in the fighting between the nation's two top generals. We are seeing most of it happen in Khartoum. Hospitals have been targeted. They've been shut down as the death toll continues to rise. Clashes had erupted between the commander of the armed forces, Abdel Fattah Burhan, against the head of the Rapid Support Forces. Now, despite a constant clamor of airstrikes, artillery fire and shooting over the capital, we had a United Nations envoy who come out and said that the two sides who are fighting are not giving the impression that they want anything to do with mediation or a peaceful negotiation right away.
The world is watching as a deadly power struggle unfolds between rival military factions in Sudan.
I strongly condemn the outbreak of fighting that is taking place in Sudan.
It's a fragile situation.
The country is in a strategic location, bordering the Red Sea, the Sahel, and the Horn of Africa. And the conflict could destabilize an already volatile region. Here's what's at stake for international actors in the crisis. The White House has called for an immediate ceasefire to the fighting. Western powers, including the U.S., had swung behind a transition towards democratic elections following the overthrow of President Omar al-Bashir in 2019. After a military coup in 2021, they suspended financial support and backed a plan for a new transition and a civilian government.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Western powers also fear the potential for a Russian base on the Red Sea, which Sudanese military leaders have expressed openness to. An agreement to host a base was originally reached under Bashir, and military leaders have said it remains under review. Moscow has long sought warm water ports for its navy, and in 2020, President Vladimir Putin said he approved a proposal to set up a logistics hub in Sudan. One of the key players in the current conflict, General Mohamed Hamdan Daglo, or Hemedti, visited Russia earlier this year and said Sudan had no problem with countries opening bases so long as they don't pose a threat to national security. Along with Russia, Hemedti has struck up relations with other powers such as the United Arab Emirates. It, along with fellow energy-rich power Saudi Arabia, has sought to shape events in Sudan. They see the transition away from Bashir's rule as a way to roll back Islamist influence and bolster stability in the region, along with the U.S. and Britain. Meanwhile, change-averse Egypt is the most important backer of Sudan's armed forces and Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, another key player in the current conflict. Calls for a ceasefire and a return to talks are looking bleak. The possibility of protracted fighting increases the risk for civil war and complicates an already long-running economic crisis, as well as humanitarian needs in Sudan.
Now, the fighting continues there. A United States diplomatic convoy also came under fire in Sudan. Speaking during a press conference, American Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that all are safe. Let's take a look at what exactly transpired.
With regard to Sudan, look, I'm limited in terms of the details and what I can get into from here, but I can confirm that yesterday we had an American diplomatic convoy that was fired on. All of our people are safe and unharmed. But this action was reckless, it was irresponsible, and of course unsafe.
Becky Chin from Voice of America.
In the calls that I had this morning with Generals Hemedti and Burhan, I made very clear that any attacks, threats, dangers posed to our diplomats were totally unacceptable.
On Sudan, can you provide more details on reports that the U.S. embassy vehicles?
This morning, I made calls to Generals Burhan and Hemedti, urging them to agree to a 24-hour ceasefire, to allow Sudanese to safely reunite with their families, and to obtain desperately needed relief supplies.
Ways both with the Saudi Arabia-Iran deal and its own proposal for peace in Ukraine.
If implemented successfully, a ceasefire for 24 hours can create a foundation to build upon for a more sustained halt to fighting and a return to negotiations on a durable end to the hostilities.
How much are you worried his comment may undermine global support for?
Despite a pause agreement, unfortunately, the fighting continues, and it's the civilian, the innocent people that are caught in the crossfire. United Nations is also keeping a close watch. Take a look at what they had to say.
In these current circumstances, under the current conditions, basically no aid delivery can happen. That doesn't mean that projects are suspended or stopped, but if people cannot move, if our staff, WFP, UNICEF, UNDP, WHO, and other staff cannot move, if they have to hunker down in their residences or in shelters, if their vehicles have been looted, if their offices have been destroyed, or if their offices and the guest houses are in the crossfire between the firing lines, then they are simply not able to deliver. That's not a suspension.